Vanderbilt University in January. Tears seems a fitting follow-up to Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, where we learned how white privilege and white supremacy affects and benefits white people. In Tears, Dr. Dyson implores us to see how the construct of whiteness keeps us ignorant about the lives of Black communities. Written in the form of a sermon, which we can talk about, sermons generally begin from a place of suffering, moving to a place of freedom and then release. Dr. Dyson is appealing to our hearts and our humanity. He wants us to know what it feels like to be Black in America, and he does not hold anything back. If you haven't read the book, topics he covers in depth include affirmative action, Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, how Barack Obama's election led directly to Trump's election, the acquittal of O.J. Simpson, police brutality, Black Lives Matter, the N-word, and the role racism plays in each of these topics. And he paints picture after picture of the experiences of ordinary Black people in America and the toll that racism and white willful ignorance and denial have taken on generations. He writes, "Beloved, your white innocence is a burden to you, a burden to the nation, a burden to our progress. It is time to let it go, to let it die in the place of the Black bodies that it wills into non-being. In its place should rise a curiosity, but even more, a genuine desire to know and understand just what it means to be Black in America." So my first question is, what made you the most uncomfortable, or what made you actually squirm when you read the book? Anybody want to share? Sheva?
So it was in the N-word chapter. I mean, I was listening to it on audiobook, so it just hits you when you hear it again and again, like spoken aloud. But I think it was in that chapter that he talked about little girls that were at a pool, and a white girl swims up to them and says the N-word to them. I just the fact that was, like modern day times, that was like seen as an innocent thing to do, just really, really struck me.
And I think that was either his daughter or granddaughter. Yeah. I actually wrote that down as well. And his language there, he describes it as the first time racism stole upon her. It was heart-wrenching. Thank you. Judy. You have to, Judy, you have to unmute.
The other thing in that same chapter that just opened my eyes with the N-word, he says that it's lynching, castration, rape, rioting, intellectual inferiority, goes on, second-class citizenship. And it just never would enter my mind that when a Black person heard that, all of this, came to their minds, and it meant all of these things to them. So it was even a far, far more hurtful term, I think, than I know I ever imagined. It was much stronger.
For me, was in the opening chapter when he talks about getting stopped by the cops. And he said, I'm a professor, I'm going to pick up my papers. And the police officer said, and I'm John Wayne. I mean, that just was very uncomfortable to
Mhm.
read. Janine?
So it's been a while since I've read the book, so I don't remember all the specifics, but the general feeling was just of being called out. You know, like he was so direct in saying how we've been living and how we have ignored what's going on, and that makes us culpable.
Mm.
So it was pretty much throughout the book, just knowing I have to take responsibility.
Yes. Judy?
Hi, this is my first meeting.
Welcome.
Jill Orbach told me about it, and I've been meaning to join you, so thanks for letting me. I just finished the book yesterday, and I've been reading a lot. In fact, some of the books that you've already discussed that I wasn't able to attend your discussion. This is something I really needed. It's really hard to imagine the day-to-day life of the, quote, average Black American going through feeling so vulnerable, but having to feel so strong at the same time while they're dying inside. My reading and other lectures that I've seen on Zoom led me to understand that they live a life of persistent PSTD. And I heard a lecturer talk about that, to feel that all your life and all your family's life, you go through this, that you're on edge all the time. You can never let up. You can never let go. It is just appalling. And it just really disturbs me. And I think we all need to see that. So all of his stories, his personal stories that he relayed in this book were gut punched, but I think we really need to hear that.
Thank you. Joel?
I mean, to follow up on what you said, Susan, what I recall reacting to was the getting stopped experience, and thinking about the few times that, happened to me, turning right when I shouldn't have, something like that, and realize that there was at no point when I was fearful or thinking anything other than, okay, well, this is a pain, I might get a ticket, rather than the very deep reaction that he and other, Black men will feel, and also his description of feeling embarrassed in front of his wife and his son crying in the back seat. So what I took from that is that we need, when we go through any experience in our lives that we might just chalk up as an inconvenience, a Black man may, or woman may feel, gee, this may be something radically more than that.
Yeah. Roseanne?
As I'm thinking about this, I've done a lot of reading and listening over the past months, such that when I was with a friend driving this summer and thinking I was driving on a road, it was a walking road, but it was very wide. It looked like cars could go on it. Anyway, I came to a dead end, And somebody who worked there stopped me and was nice enough to say I could, no, I guess I could continue on that road out to the main road or turn around and go back out. And now I am conflicted about, my response was of suspecting, maybe even assuming that were I Black, he would have responded differently to me. So that's just raising the question of who to trust. I mean, how do we know what anybody's thinking or where anybody's coming from
Mm-hmm.
or what people believe?
And we don't. And one of the things that I did appreciate was some of the statistics, which are important to me about how often Black people are stopped. I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but those are real. Judy Weinstein, did you want to?
Well, I think his story that really got to me was when he was a little boy and he was in the car with another kid and this other boy's parents, and they were down south, and the mother took the two boys into a diner kind of against her judgment to get some food. And they were just going to take out. I mean, they weren't even planning on sitting down. And the man behind the counter very calmly said, "We don't serve." Yeah, word. And I mean, she was just shaking, took the boys out and told them, you mustn't say anything to the other kid's father who was there, and told him, never, ever tell your father about this. And he said he kept this secret from his father until his father's death. He was just understood the significance of it and what might happen, what his father might do if he found out. It was just chilling. The other thing that I find shocking, I got the book from the library, and someone who had the book out made copious comments in it. And I almost felt as if Donald Trump had been the one reading this book before me. So that story with the swimming pool, where he said this was lethal. Lethal means fatal, deadly. Being called a name is not lethal. And that's one of the nicer comments in the book. So every time I came to one of those comments, I was enraged.
Thank you, Judy. Sue Bondi.
Just to build on that, because one of the things that I was thinking as I read it is that we are basically a group of people who know that we have these issues and that we need to learn about it. And I kept thinking about all the tens and hundreds of thousands of people who should read this book, but never will. Maybe some of them are, but but not truly, understanding what's trying to be shared with us.
So my next question, I think we touched on some of it, but what was there anything else that shocked you or just rocked you to your core? What I wrote there was, and I'm sorry, but I can't remember who talked about this, is what it must be like every single day for Black people in this country to have to study white culture, to have to study white people. He wrote Black folk have to know white culture inside and out. When you step on the elevator with us, we whistle Vivaldi and the theme from Andy Griffith to put you at ease. And I just thought it has to be exhausting, just exhausting. And at some point he talks about the toll that it takes, physically and mentally. So does anybody want to comment, or are there any other things? Hi, Bess.
I was reading stories. I'm sorry. So if I'm redundant on stuff people have said, what struck me, a ton of stuff struck me and upset me, but talking about the N-word and having to explain to a 7-year-old what the N-word was and not being able to tell your dads that somebody had used that word. I mean, that just broke my heart. And that wasn't something that I had ever thought of. I mean, I would never say that word. I don't think I have ever said that word. God, I hope I haven't ever said that word. But the fact that you would have to explain that to your child, I don't know.
Come on.
As a lot of us know, Black parents have to explain a lot of things to
More than that, yeah.
Right. To their children. They have to have the talk. And I mean, for decades, it really just gutted me to think about that Black parents have to decide when to have that talk. In 1999, I heard the author Beverly Tatum Daniels, thank you, Abby, in Washington, D.C. And I think at the time she might have been a professor at Amherst. So she's a Black woman, and they live in the town of Amherst, and she had to have a talk with her sons to say, you can never, ever, ever run when you're in town. I don't care if you're late for school, if you forgot something, you can never be running, because what people will see is, an adolescent Black boy running, and it won't end well. That really stayed with me. Other comments, Robin? Unmute yourself.
I was just thinking about, in the last few years, we've been able to see this happen. We've seen a Black person running, shot in the back. We've seen a guy with the police on his knees, treating him as less than human. And that has, I hope, helped a lot of us understand the truth of all that's in this book and how far back it goes in our history. And it's still happening. It's really, really alarming. That's about all.
Sheva, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yeah, that's right. I just wanted to add, there was one section, I think it was near the end, where he talked about his experience becoming a professor or going through schooling, and how discouraging they were at school, telling him that he should drop out or not go to, I don't remember all the details, but I just wanted to add that to the discussion, because I think even at that, you hear that a lot at the elementary school level or, high school, but here he was already in college and they were telling him that he shouldn't pursue finishing his degree. So just the way we as a society at every step try to like stop people from dreaming just really, hit me about this book.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying, Shava, if that's okay. He was asked to come in and show documentation that he got into Princeton, I believe it was, and that he would not be believed on his merit that he got in, because he knew he had to get out of that school. To your point, and that really struck me that we don't believe you, so go get the documentation that shows your letter of acceptance.
Joyce.
Yeah, something that you said, Sue, reminded me of such a painful experience of over 20 years ago. I think there was a wonderful Black woman minister, very strong woman. And she reported that her son, who was a teenager, was with a couple of other young people around the Field Street area there. And they got picked up for doing nothing and taken to the police station. Ultimately, after she came the next day, they were released, but what she said was, I lost him that day. I never had him again.
So Dyson writes, the siege of hate will not end until white folk imagine themselves as black folk, vulnerable despite our virtues. I wonder if you can think for a moment about a time or a situation where things may have gone differently if you were Black. One of the phrases that stay with me is how often that we as white people are given the benefit of the doubt. So I wonder if there's a time or a situation where you think things might have gone differently if you were Black. Nancy.
I've been thinking about this. I mean, really, it's like my whole life, because just from the time I was a young child, my expectations, I would have whatever I wanted. Education, I could do whatever I want. I could go wherever I want. I could be whoever I want. And this is just not true for people of color.
Robin?
I think I've talked to you about this, Susan, but my son had 2 years of severe mental illness and he was out of control. And they had to take him away in a straitjacket sometimes. But I've thought about all the people, the Black people who were shot by police, and how he certainly could have been, because he was violent. And it just, when I was living alone with him and he would get out of control, he was in a group home when this happened, but I would often just be at my wit's end and say, I need to call the police to threaten him, but people have done that, mothers who have done that, their children have been shot when the police came to the door. So but then I also remember in 2nd grade or 4th grade, 2 Black children that were children of migrant workers came to be in my class for a little while. And how the boy sitting behind them put paste in their hair just to be funny. And there were no repercussions, but I just remember how deeply that affected me. It was horrible.
Melissa. You just muted yourself.
Okay, so Susan, you know this story, but it was the beginning of my journey to learn about privilege that I had no idea I'd grown up with. No idea. I was in a very familiar place. I was in Monroe Avenue, Marshalls, and I bought a box of nesting, a set of nesting boxes, and the salesperson scanned it without opening it. And so there are 3 boxes in there, and I'm turning away, and she's moving to the next customer who spoke up and said, I take umbrage. I take offense. You did not open her boxes, and you're opening the purse I'm buying and taking out all the contents. And I turned back and saw for the first time, the next customer was a Black woman, a young woman, very well dressed and very well spoken. I mean, just in terms of impressions and privilege, what passes for first impressions and judgments. She had the purse. The clerk had taken out all the stuffing, and the clerk was a young person, and a white person, and she froze like, you got me. What do I say now? And I felt very present in this event. I witnessed it. I was experiencing it alongside. I was a witness. And the Black woman said, I would like to talk to your manager. With great equilibrium, she said, I want to talk to your supervisor. And I wanted to say, me too, or something like that. But I was frozen with the realization that that was a moment of judgment between the 2 customers. And that's what I had skated with all my life without knowing. So that was the so-called silent, the backpack. Is that it? The invisible backpack. So I turned away thinking, I don't know what I can contribute now. She seems to have this and she's right. And I was clueless about what my part could be in this. And it bothered me. So I left the store. It bothered me deeply. I talked to my family about it. I said, what should I have done? Various people told me you couldn't have done anything. And I knew there was something I should be doing. And then one day it dawned on me, I could have said, would you like me to come with you? And rather than, as I've been reading about issues of race and judgment and injustice, you know, the caveat is not to be the white rescuer.
Yeah, the white savior.
That's it. That's it. So it wasn't like, let me fix it. But I feel conviction now. I could have said, would you like me to come with you? Just so she knew she had a witness. And I knew she was right. And how brave it was for her to speak up. And that was the beginning where I said, man, I have a lot to catch up with.
That's what I was going to say, Melissa. I mean, for what, you know, in addition to what you said you could do, I mean, what you did do is that was at the beginning of your self-education and then educating others. I mean, and your anti-racist work in the community.
It was a complete game changer for me. And I thought, boy, if I'm oblivious, I know many, many people who are also oblivious.
Yeah.
And it is not useful to help other people feel guilty, which I definitely felt. I felt shame and guilt, and it took a long time to stop feeling guilty so much as to feel a mantle of responsibility to catch up on the subject.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else want to? Weigh in?
Sandy, under John.
Hi, Sandy.
Hi.
Go ahead.
You know what occurs to me, Melissa, as you were sharing that, is that as I have been kind of reading and thinking about what I've been reading more, that I would not have thought to do had I been in your place then, is that I might have turned to this woman and said, you know, it didn't even occur to me that she wasn't even checking out these boxes. And thank you for pointing that out to me and helping me to see that.
I mean, thank you, Sandy. I mean, I think one of the questions that I have for all of you was, did you have an aha moment or a woke moment? Something that you had never thought about before. I mean, and some of you have spoken to this, but it's kind of like what you talked about, Melissa. You know, and I'll just say for me, my first reading of the book, this was my third reading of the book, was when he was writing about the history of whiteness, and he said, you never stop to think that Babe Ruth never had to play the greatest players of his generation, just the greatest white players. And boy, I never, ever thought about anything like that.
The only thing.
Go ahead, Robin.
The only thing I mean, the thing that I remember learning is that nigger and nigga are two different words. I didn't ever recognize that before. I never recognized that. And there's a big difference.
Yep. Judy Loeb.
Throughout the summer, actually since George Floyd's murder, I've been reading a lot. And I just get really angry because we all remember how little of the history of the Black Americans from slavery on to this day we ever learned that was true. We were fed a bunch of lies. I understood that our country was founded on hypocrisy, that our founding fathers owned slaves, and that even in the Constitution, slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person. But I'm more and more angry that we do not know our history, and how we can change that nationally is a huge issue because there will be pushback. So the only thing I can do is learn it myself.
And pass on what you learned.
Right.
Roseanne?
There we go. I was just curious if anybody had the thought of no longer indicating on forms that we asked our race to indicate white. And I thought, I don't have to answer that anymore. I mean, I guess I can contribute to the discussion that it's irrelevant.
I have had that thought before. Bess?
There are some reasons, sometimes when you have to answer that question, I'm just thinking now when we're doing COVID tests in the office, health department, and actually, I don't know why we have to put this, need to know what American Indian, white, Black,
Asian, what kind of Asian?
yeah.
And it's part of meaningful use that Health and Human Services requires in order to be compliant with their regulations.
So
race, ethnicity, which is either Hispanic or non-Hispanic, and primary language.
That's something we have to fill out.
Yeah. And presumably there's some reasons for it, since apparently Black people may be more, one doesn't know for sure, maybe more susceptible, and that may be for environmental and racism reasons or genetics or whatever, but yeah.
Abby, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm an epidemiologist.
There you go.
And race and ethnicity is something we try and collect, partly because, we can say, oh, all right, we know that there's disparities, according to race in these different health outcomes. But unless we have the data, to actually say that, it's hard to convince anybody else. And so that really does contribute. Sometimes in order to say there's a problem, we have to have the data to back it up. Just like there has been a big push sort of internationally to gather more data about police violence and disparities in that, and that there's almost a way, and sometimes that having that data and studying something can be sort of radical or revolutionary, even if it's something that's sort of widely known. To be able to actually back that up with numbers is a pretty big deal.
Thank you, Abby. Joel, and then Randy.
Dyson made the point that affirmative action has been operating for white people for 400 years. And that really struck me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Randy?
I think what struck me most profoundly about the book was I read it long enough ago that I don't recall the specific details, but what hit me was the realization that racism and bigotry are white problems. They're not, I mean, they're as much white problems as the consequences of them are Black problems. And that the longer we avoid addressing these problems that we have created and perpetuated, sometimes unconsciously, really is what's preventing us from moving forward. And until we individually and we as a community starts to acknowledge this, we are not going to be able to offer reparation, make changes. And that was profound for me.
Randy, I totally agree with that. Thank you. It's very useful. And it dawned on me the ultimate evidence of or indication of white privilege is the option of looking away. And if white people show up, you know, there's a chance before we become a complete minority and disappear. Let's just be real. Not fearful, but aware that inevitably we're going to be a minority. And a lot of people are, I think, fearful of that. And Randy, you sent this video today called Monopoly, or using the metaphor of monopoly.
Melissa, I'm just gonna ask you to pause for a second because I am gonna talk about that video at the end.
Okay, okay, good. Well, I just want to say that I was just mentioning that today, people who think it's not about them. Was this Rabbi Niemauer? Was he a rabbi who said, and that they came from me? I don't know who his full name, but
Protestant minister.
Why people don't see humanity. How can we get people to see humanity instead of differences? I think that's our big challenge, is to enlist everyone to see humanity.
Thank you. Thank you. There's two more topics that I have. One are the police. And then I do want to end with hope and what we can do. So I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about that chapter. This is what he writes. The metaphor of a few bad apples doesn't begin to get at the root of the problem. Police violence may be more like a poisoned water stream that pollutes the entire system. To argue that only a few bad cops cause police terror is like relegating racism to a few bigots. Bigots are surely a problem, but they are sustained by systems of belief and perception, by widely held stereotypes and social practice. And he says, beloved, you must not be defensive when you hear our hurt. We who proclaim the terror of cops do not hate all cops. We hate what cops have been made to be. We hate how cops hate us. We hate that cops don't treat us the way they treat you. So comments or reactions about that chapter? Police. Alice.
When I read it, I started feeling panicked, imagining what it would be like to be Black and constantly in fear of how I was going to be treated if I was stopped for speeding. I mean, I know I was scared enough when I had an accident and the police came, but to think that every single time you passed the policeman or, you know, thought you might get pulled over for the most minor things, your life would be in danger. And I believe that they are. I've worked in courts and jail system, and I always said it's a good thing that there are different uniforms for the inmates and the guards, so I could tell them apart. I do think that it would just it would take so much to live under those circumstances all the time. And I sometimes, and I know we mentioned this in the book, have we ever thought about, wonder if Black people just rebelled and treated us the way they're treated? And I've thought of that before, and I think it takes a lot of gumption not to treat us that way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I can't remember if it was his book or not. You know, you say, oh, I can't believe, you know, that there's another angry Black man or another angry Black woman. The question is why, you know, it's shocking that there's not more. Just to go to what, you know, you were saying, Alice. Other comments or reactions about?
Just that I wish there weren't so much anger about the idea of defunding police and not understanding what it really means.
Yeah, I think I've heard a lot of people talk about it. Specifically, Danielle Ponder gave a fantastic talk about it. And she said, you know, the name is unfortunate. Because when I heard her talk about mental health professionals responding to calls that were clearly a mental health issue, it really helped me to understand, you know, how resources could be going to professional mental health people.
And defensiveness is always something they have to confront, the white defensiveness.
Yes.
Howard,
yes.
Yeah.
Nancy?
Sorry. I can't remember whether it was in his book or one of the others that I'm just reading about the history of police deriving from slave patrolling. And I can't remember if he mentioned that. I've just been rereading Cass. So. But that whole idea, so forever, African-American people have lived with this fear always. So policing really has a bad history for them.
Judy?
On that subject, one of the books that I read was Chokehold. I think it's by Paul Butler. And that was the history of policing in America. And I do recommend it. It was a real eye opener and very disturbing.
Thank you, Judy. Sandy.
Trying to remember whether this was something that in the 21-day challenge or in a different book that just talked about how the structural racism that exists has put police in the position of having to contain Blacks and keep them away from us. And that has been sort of drilled in, that if there wasn't this structural racism, this need to keep suburbs and cities separated, that it would be very different. And so it's certainly, there's so much to be said for deficits in police training, the history that has come along with it, but we just can't lose sight of the position that they've been put in because of the structural racism that exists. Yeah, maybe my husband's saying maybe it was what Barack Obama said on 60 Minutes the other night. I think it was.
Thank you. So it is, boy, this hour flew by. We have just a couple more minutes. And I do want to end on, I feel like if Dr. Dyson has hope, then I have to have hope. And he gives us some practical suggestions, which I love. I love. And I'm not going to go through it. Most of you have read the book, but I'm curious if any of those things spoke to any of you in particular. Is there anything that you could say, okay, after reading this, I'm going to commit to doing one of these things?
Susan?
Yes, Janine.
One of my favorite things about the book was actually being given the permission to do something extra. Like if there's two people applying for a job, not that I'm hiring people, but give the position to the Black person. Like before he actually gave that permission, I would have felt that was the wrong thing to do. Like I actually think I would have viewed that as being racist, like considering race. And he kind of gave me the permission to consider race and consider giving them the extra, buying from them instead of a white person. So I love that about the book.
Thank you. Anybody else? Let me just go to Sharon. Go ahead, Sharon.
I was thinking, and because we hear so much and read so much, I don't remember if it was the interfaith tea group or where we said this, but if Biden hadn't won, I think, and now that he has won, but if he hadn't won, I just think that we need to continue with trying even harder than we try. We have to learn more than we even have learned. We need to act more and be proactive even more than we've even been proactive. That we can never stop trying to, I don't know that we'll ever reach equality, as he, said that we'll never be equal, but maybe we will. But I think we just can never give up. And I know that the people that I know and my other people that I know will always be working for trying to reach that next level where we can be more on an even plane, if ever. We just can never stop trying to make things better. And that's how I always hope I'll be able to be.
And recognizing, you know, with our hearts and humanity, that there was a paragraph, I'm not going to read all of it, but it begins with, we want what you want.
Yeah.
We want to pursue our dreams. We want to raise our children in safety. We want good schools. We want good jobs, and we want health care. There was a question in the chat from Joyce Herman. And if you did listen to the U of R interview, Dr. Dyson did give me a shout out, which was so crazy to be listening to that. So I wrote him a letter about a week before his talk at U of R. And I just told him pretty much what I told you guys at the beginning, how this book rocked me to my core. And I thought I had known some things before. And that I was as excited to see him when he was supposed to be coming in March, as I was to see Stevie Wonder in the 80s. And so, and I also talked about the exquisite language. And I mean, it wasn't very long. It was pretty short. And the response was an auto response. It said, oh, Dr. Dyson gets, you know, thousands of letters. And if you want him to come speak, you have to fill out this form. Okay. So when he shouted out about the letter, I was as excited as I was to see Stevie Wonder. And if you haven't seen the video, I think you'll understand why the Stevie Wonder piece spoke to him, because he's really into music and he sings a little bit during that interview. So, so that's it. Thanks for asking, Joyce. Thank you, everyone, so much. Lindsay, do you want, we can all unmute now if we want to say goodbye, but thank you all so much.
Thank you too,
joining in.
Susan, you were going to say something about the Monopoly analogy.
Yes. I will send it to Nancy. It is an angry Black woman, so there it is. And she, in a nutshell, talks about Black people's, what has happened to Black people through history, like a Monopoly game.
Wow.
What if you were given this amount of money, property, your property gets taken away? It's fantastic. It's really jarring. So I will, Nancy, I'll send that to you, and can you send it out to the group? Okay.
I just wanted to make one comment to with Susan's meeting of Stevie Wonder. It was kind of in a store that was like a Best Buy, and we're in there, and he's in there, you know, looking at stuff. So it's not at a concert. It was, they were both shopping in the same aisle. So, and I also want to let everybody know that Susan's really put a lot of time into this because it's so important to her, and I think it showed tonight. And you know, at least I feel very, you know, lucky that I get to see her every day, and I'm just, you know, I'm very proud of her. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank
you.
Hey, Susan, who
Yeah.
recognized who first? Did you recognize Stevie Wonder, or did he recognize you?
He had a bodyguard with him, which was his cousin. who
You
was-
had Roy.
And I approached the bodyguard, and because I obviously knew that Stevie couldn't see me coming, and I said, would it be okay just to say something to him? And I was shaking and crying while I was talking.
It's so sweet. Oh, it's sweet.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh,
thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Wonderful.
Pleasure.
I know this is so
Susan.
meaningful to you, Susan. So important to you.
What is the next book that's coming out for next month?
Nancy, you got it. Nancy, you have to unmute.
Unmute.
Hi, Abby. I'll say
Okay.
it quick to
All
you.
right, two things. The next book is Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, which I think is like the book of the century. And when you read that, it just reframes everything.
I'll call you back.
Okay,
sounds good.
Okay.
What?
Sorry,
Everybody-
that was
Cast by Isabel Wilkerson in mid-December. But Susan, what I really wanted to say before that was Susan had a real passion for this book. And she really brought that to the discussion. And I think it was fantastic. And I don't need to be a leader all the time. So if you have a book on this topic that you're passionate about and want to share with everybody, send me an email and we can fix a date for you, because I'm certainly not going to do this forever. I want to do Cast and I want to do Stamped from the beginning. And then, but after I do Cast, anybody else, feel free. So just let me know. And you don't have to be a member of Temple Sinai either. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, Nancy.
All right.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye. Thanks again.
Bye, everyone.
You're welcome.
Hi, Eb. So good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Take
Susan,
care.
thank
Happy
you.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good
Bye,
job,
Abby.
Susan.
Hi, Martha. Hi.
Hey, Melissa.
Good to see you, Abby.
Yeah, you too. The
Wow.
whole gang. I didn't
You're here.
expect to see so many people I knew.
It's good to see you.
You too.
I loved seeing you. I loved seeing you at the service a couple weeks ago with the baby.
Oh yeah.
That
She
was
really-
great.
She likes Zoom shul. She
I
really.
loved her smile. It was great.
Oh.
Thanks for contributing, Abs.
Well, it was my moment. Thursday
Yeah, it sure
moment.
was. It was made for you.
So
Sorry, I couldn't contribute more,
Abby-
Susan. I read it and I couldn't remember anything, so I have to go read it at least the second time and maybe the third time.
Right.
But first, I'm in the middle of White Fragility, so I got to finish that first, and that's a tough slog for me. So
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
I read it 1 or 2 chapters a day. That's how I did it. I said, I really can't say I'm going to sit down and read this. So I said, I can do 1 or 2 chapters a day.
I find myself repeating sentences because I can't. I mean, they're just so dense
It is.
that I'm not even sure I'm understanding them as I'm reading them. So
Yeah.
it's a tough slog, but
It
we'll
is.
get there.
It is.
So thanks again for doing this. That was really great.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And hi, Melissa. I haven't seen you in many, many months.
I miss you, Elise.
I miss you too.